Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland, one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. We are here continuing our celebration of the 60th anniversary of Star Trek. With me on this voyage to discuss the next generation classic, Measure of a Man, is Neil Chatterjee and Jordan Hoopert. Friends, countrymen, guys, how are you each doing?
I'm doing great. I've been on in a while, Josh, so I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. It's fun times.
Indeed. And I again, we interact on LinkedIn, so you're a very busy man. Jordan, how are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Very excited to be here to talk about one of my favorite Next Generation episodes.
And a great courtroom episode in Trek. And so technically, I think the third. So let's rock and roll with this. So beforehand, we were chatting about similarities to other courtroom episodes. So the original series had court martial. Before that, it had the cage, the menagerie,
Right.
what technically is Spock's court martial, which echoes then in the court martial episode. And some of that then echoes over into this, highlighting the similarities that somebody paid attention to trial procedure. Neil, what were some of the similarities that you noticed between the proceedings?
Well, I mean, the most obvious one, right, is when the witness puts their hand on a device that says everything about them. I mean, in the original series, it was a ball, and now it's kind of like a flat iPad-like device. But the more subtle ones that I really liked is that Captain Picard and the judge in the case, Lavoie, um, they clearly had a romantic relationship before, and it was during a time when she was prosecuting him for a potential court-martial proceeding. And those facts, even though it's different characters, are exactly the same as what happens in the court-martial proceeding. And just throughout the whole episode, there are these little references here and there that, if you remember the court-martial episode, it kind of harkens back to what happens there.
Yeah, and which is again good attention to detail. Somebody's paying attention. This episode was written by a lawyer who actually did research on how a court martial would happen on a ship, with what the role the captain would play, the role that the first officer would play. So again, there's lots of things that echo true to make this like a good proceeding. But throughout this episode, we have the question of like, what are fundamental rights? And because we have Data, gets orders to be dissected. And it's one thing to be in the military and asked to go out and do something dangerous. It's another thing to be voluntold to go to do an experiment that could kill you. That's that's different. So we get issues of fundamental rights and due process, and let's hit those and get into then the trial issues. So, Jordan, you're been a defense attorney. What are fundamental rights for those unfamiliar?
I suppose that it's at its core term, they are rights that everyone has under the law that the government can't just take away from you without some kind of due process. Um, so, I think anybody who's ever seen a police procedural show has the Miranda rights at least once or twice read in that show. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, they'll appoint an attorney to you. Um, Things like that. The government can't just come in and search your house. They can't seize your property. Uh, all the good time things that you have to enjoy as a citizen.
Neil, your thoughts?
Yeah, so well, I mean, there's plenty of fundamental rights, but I think the interesting issue here is who gets those rights. Like my dogs that just came into my little home office here, they don't have First Amendment rights. They like to exercise them when the Amazon guy comes to the door, but at the end of the day, they don't have First Amendment rights. They don't have to be Mirandized when they're in trouble. none of those things. And so, if we turn it back to measure of a man, I think the key word there is man. Is he human or not, as opposed to is he some sentient life form? And if he is something that approximates a human, then he should get some fundamental rights before they just take him apart.
And again, this episode hits on who gets those rights, which is, as we look at the 250th anniversary of our founding, not the 250th anniversary of the Constitution, like those are big issues. We hold these rights to be self-evident that, we don't like the Star Chamber. We don't like people disappearing in the middle of the night. We don't like the British shooting people at Bunker Hill. Like those are all things that upset, our ancestors in the founding of this country. And it's a good thing to talk about today as we look at this episode of what are those fundamental rights? Because data, the question is, what is human? And we that's where the cross-examination comes in. But again, it goes to the due process issue. Now, data doesn't automatically get a hearing. Would either of you like to address, the fact Picard had to go to bat to make sure he had the right to say, I don't want to do this?
Jordan, you want to go for it first? So I'm happy to.
Sure. I mean, I think this is one of the, at least in my memory, and it's been a long time since I've done a end-to-end rewatch of Next Generation, but this is one of the first times you see Picard as like the real caring captain about, my crew and this is my officer and I'm not going to let you just take him away for nothing. And it is really just kind of one of the early inspiring Picard bits where he's in the JAG office raising hell about how Data has rights. And if as you um if you stick with the JAG officer whose name I don't remember, but she says something at the beginning about fine, Data's a toaster. Uh which is an interesting place to start. But Picard has to go in and fight that out just to get a hearing on whether or not he has rights, which I suppose if you think about it from a step back point, if I had to go in and get a hearing about whether or not my dog had rights, that would be an interesting place to start.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Josh, because the way the episode starts, right, is the JAG officer says, well, he can just quit. He can just quit Starfleet, and then he's not going to be subject to any of these rules, wouldn't be dissected. And it kind of is, I mean, it's very much like normal litigation or trial where you're like, oh, I've come up with this clever solution to solve a problem. And then, Data says, I'm resigning. I'm not going to be one anymore. And then all of a sudden they come back and they say, you can't quit. You're a thing. You're not a person. And only people can quit. And, you kind of have these unpredictable things where for whatever strategy one lawyer develops, it then gets backfires or has to go in a different direction because someone else pushes back with another creative argument.
Yeah, hence the art of lawyering. But when you talk about, seek out new life, new civilizations, again, that's part of the theme of this of there's that new life. Who are you to say it's alive or not? Which again, like our country has an ugly history with that multiple times. So it's, so again, all bad, not good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of the most interesting part of the episode is kind of the aha moment for Picard is when he's sitting and talking to Guinan. And Guinan kind of analogizes it to, slavery and how you're basically, if you were to make 1,000 datas, you'd be creating a new life form and a race that was going to be something less than normal humans. And it's kind of you're really moving kind of moment when that happens, and then it gets obviously brought into the trial.
Yeah.
talk about taking the other side's best argument to make your own. I mean, Maddox from the beginning is saying like, wouldn't it be great if every starship had a data?
Yeah,
Okay, would it?
yeah, it's good. We should all have someone who's good at math. Like I was doing scout stuff today. It's like having someone who's good at using the hand sander or planning how to plot a course or someone who's a good cook. Like those are all things that are valuable skill sets, but you can't manufacture them. You want people to be, I like math. I like navigation. I like doing that. Now, it's important that everyone, if again, if you're doing boating, you know those things, but people are going to develop specialties. And what's data specialty? Well, science guy, engineer guy, you know,
Very strong
Yeah.
guy.
yeah, good, very good wingman, like very, it's like someone he is super cool and wants to hang out with his cat and learn how to paint and other human qualities. So, yeah, again, the idea of like what is humanity is a big one that echoes throughout all of Trek. So we have those fundamental rights. We have a battle to have due process, which again, core of our system. You're not supposed to take someone's life, liberty, without some form of due process of law. And again, what kind of process varies depending on the issue. Like the dog does have some rights.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
there's criminal statutes that protect them. And, now there are some states that say a dog is considered a member of the family. But they're different rights than we have. Right?
Yeah. They're protected, and society values your pet, whether it's a dog, cat, parakeet, whatever, you want to make sure that there's protections for those. And
Did just, I don't mean to change the topic a little bit, Josh, but when you watched the episode, did you sit there thinking, what does Q think about all this?
I did not.
Because it's, his whole thing is the trial of humanity, right? Like that's the whole thing. And then here we actually have a subset of that exact issue going on. The whole time I was watching, I rewatched it this morning and it was like, what does Q think about this? Like,
Yeah.
That's an interesting point.
Well, then, like Q's trial of humanity, Q was the prosecutor and the judge, which we don't do. That's not okay on all kinds of levels. But it's like, well, dude, like Data has counsel. Like there's an impartial judge, and we're discussing his rights, which was way more due process than Q was willing to give in Encounter at Farpoint or All Good Things. So yeah. Now we have some nitty-gritty legal issues that come up. So and we've all started identifying them. So one that we've talked about at cons was, did Riker have a conflict of interest in prosecuting Data? And you do need like the waiver issue addressed, but that's also kind of the job of the first officer, like in those type of situations. It sucks. Like he is not a happy camper, but he doesn't want a summary ruling against Data either. So like he has to. So again, that would suck to be him in that position.
yeah, but I mean, oh, go ahead, Jordan.
I just say I was really glad that they kind of addressed that at the end of the episode, where they're all having the celebration for Data and his winning, and Data goes and invites Riker to come join them, and says something like, "If you had refused to prosecute, the judge would have ruled against me, and in doing so, you saved me and injured yourself, and that's friendship."
Yeah, I would understand why Riker might want to be in the holodeck with a punching bag, just because I would be upset in that type of situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, like the issue is right. Like I don't know if there's a conflict of interest for Riker. I mean, the reality is that sometimes you are asked to do things or you need to do things that you might not necessarily agree with in case. It doesn't mean you're doing anything unethical. It doesn't mean that you're not following the law. But you could have a detestable client who deserves representation nonetheless. And you're still going to put
Been
on,
there.
you have a legal obligation to put on a forceful defense for that.
Yeah.
Again, the duty of loyalty in this case to the state. Like
Right.
the prosecutor can't just throw the game. Like that's a no-no. Like they have to do their due diligence as
Well, the
well.
most interesting
I
thing
think
is
if a
it's non-lawyers, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if a prosecutor has a case they just flat don't believe in, they also have a duty not to go forward with it. But
Yeah.
Riker is not really in that. He doesn't have that choice.
Yeah,
Exactly.
there's a former magistrate judge that I know that, in the first round of Trump prosecutions and deportations, made the comment of there's nothing like hitting the weakest the hardest. And like he was not happy, and neither were the US attorneys tasked with doing things that they didn't like doing, even though it complied with the law. But they were like, this, I don't like this at all. And there's a lot to be said for that. Or if there's like mandatory sentencing for, let's just say a marijuana prosecution, something that could be illegal federal, but legal California or Oregon, that, it's like, I don't like doing this as the, US attorney, but like it's the law still.
Yeah, well, I mean, in California state, it is a crime to steal a shopping cart from a grocery store. It's actually an actual criminal. It's in the Business Professions Code, but it's a criminal act. And there are some jurisdictions around the state of California that regularly go after homeless people or unhoused people who have shopping carts that they took from whatever grocery stores and things. And it's like, okay, they may not have the discretion because their supervisors are telling them they got to do it, but it's hard to sleep at night when you're asked to do that kind of stuff, right? And it's just like, I mean, just like here where you're being asked to prosecute someone that's your friend. And also, I think part of this also plays into the fact that there wasn't anyone to do it, like that was a hugely material issue in the case.
Yeah, it raises, the question again, it's traumatic storytelling, but I've seen, the YouTube comedy video of the Enterprise JAG officer upset about not participating and the guy keeps ordering alcohol from the replicator. Like it's very well done, and very humorous. But again, it's like, you guys are out of JAGs? Like, how's you got a crew of 1,000? You have the 1980s historian. You don't have any lawyers on board? That's shocking. So, but again, it's not exciting storytelling of like, here's our JAG department on the Enterprise D. However, if anyone's open to ideas, all three of us are available for that. We would all tag in moment's notice and go to Vancouver. So,
Not even that far a drive for me.
no, or excuse me, Vancouver. It's or are they more Eastern Canada now? Anyway,
I don't care. I'll get there.
yeah, we'd all book a flight to Canada for filming. But let's get into some of the other issues. So we have a preservation of evidence issue that one of you identified. Could one of you take us through that?
That was me, and I think it was a typo that should have said presentation instead of preservation.
Got it.
Being a need
But the
discover
typo is a
guy,
good. I mean, the typo is right. There is a preservation of evidence issue. Um, Data is evidence. I mean, they enter, and again, I hadn't thought this through because typo, but how do you preserve the evidence of data? Like if you were going to appeal the decision, does Data not get his arm back?
Well, that's it. Like, there's this whole body of law about preservation of evidence when you have to do destructive testing on something. And, how do you, because you have to be able to replicate the activity. And if it's destroyed, you can't tell what the state of it was at the time of whatever the wrongful act or whatever the challenged act is. Here, I mean, he does put the arm right back on, because when Picard's examining him, he appears to have the full faculty of it. I think the other issue is when Riker turns him off. Like, I don't know what kind of memory loss there is when that happens.
Also just battery. It's the attorney's not supposed to touch the witness. Like that's a faux pas. Very dramatic, but like you don't get to go up and nerve pinch the witness. Like
Yeah,
that's
but going to Jordan's point on presentation of evidence, like, the whole time I had court martial in my mind, and as I was watching this, because Ariel Shaw, when she cross-examines Spock, she does what I think is a classic cross-examination. Yes, no, controlling the witness, putting them back on, and no matter how much they fight. In this instance, I'm not sure that I saw the same level of discipline on the direct and the cross-examinations, but I don't know what Jordan thinks.
No, I think you're right. There wasn't the same kind of controlling yes, no, closed-ended questions that we saw, but it ended up being very effective,
I
which
agree with that.
from a lawyer standpoint is incredibly difficult to do.
yeah,
Yeah. Like I think if
agreed.
anybody's watching this in law school thinking this is how you should litigate witnesses, it's not. 99% of the time your cross-examination is going to be something along the lines of, Mr. Maddox, you're not sure that you can bring data back, right? Yes, I'm not sure. Next question.
Yeah, well, and you don't get to argue your case in the middle of the examination, which, you see in a lot of dramas of various sorts. And in
Yeah.
this case, you're seeing that. I gave it a pass because it wasn't lawyers. It was lay people that were actually doing the presentation of the evidence.
Yeah.
They do go right from questions to Picard's argument kind of nebulously.
Yeah, because they don't have opening statements and closing arguments, right? It's just all mixed up.
I thought they had opening statements. I
Yeah.
thought they waived. Anyway,
Maybe they waived.
Anywho,
which is also a bad plan.
yeah,
Um,
you put out your roadmap. Tell the trier of fact what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and then
Yeah.
do it. When I coached high school mock trial or law students, when we've done any of our, mock trials at Comic Fest, the issue is save it for closing. Like, don't make it. If the witness is there, the witness can respond. The witness might torpedo what you just said, and you don't want to end up with egg on your face like that because you want to save it for closing. There are mic drop moments you can make on a cross and then shut up and sit down so you don't ruin it.
Totally.
There's a federal judge in Oregon who I won't name by name, but it has a binder full of what they call one question too many examples and has a wonderful presentation on it. And it is just devastating to listen to.
I was a witness recently. Firm I worked for, there was a question that from a site inspection that happened. And so I went in to testify, and it was very different being in the witness chair as opposed to counsel table. And the opposing attorney on my cross asked, "We've never met before, correct?" And my response was, "We've met twice. I defended my client's depositions at your office." And I mean, I heard jurors snicker. But again, it highlights you don't ask the question that you don't know the answer to. And I mean, I could have just said no, but I made a point.
But you also don't want to lie under oath.
No. wasn't going to do that either because I take this seriously.
Yeah.
Like this is what we do. Uh, but again, he made a boo boo.
Yeah, it's a bad start.
Yeah, very bad start.
I was cross-examining the witness once, and she had said that a letter didn't exist. And I put the letter in front of her, and she's like, I don't know who this person is that signed it. And I'm like, you don't know who that person is? And she says, no. I said, he's the person sitting right behind me. That's your lawyer that just took your testimony.
Whoops.
We all heard him introduce himself to the jury.
Wow. Yeah, you gotta avoid those mistakes. I mean, it's one thing to go, I can't read the signature. That, it's like, I can't read
Right.
that. I can't read that. Fair. But, dude, that's your lawyer. Like, judges don't like that at all.
Yeah, it was bad. It was a bad look.
Ugh.
All right, back to Measure of a Man.
Yeah.
Right then.
So, does Data have a right to not incriminate himself? Jordan, can you walk us through that?
Sure. So you, as a person who might be on trial for something, have a general right not to take the witness stand and say, I did it, unless it's, your choice. The prosecutor can't say, I call the defendant to the stand and I want to ask them all the kinds of questions under oath. It doesn't work that way. Um, when I was writing this and thinking about it, though, I'm not entirely sure that this would be a criminal situation.
Yeah,
Certainly, Data's testimony is not good for him, but in a civil case, you don't have that same level of protection, right? I'm not a civil lawyer, so I will throw that out to the room of them, but
yeah. Well, Jordan, I'll talk about that. I've had plenty of cases where my witnesses are asserting their Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination in a civil proceeding. And in federal courts, the jury can actually take a negative inference from it,
hmm,
which is, they're allowed to take a negative inference from someone's decision not to testify on their own behalf and not present evidence. In state court in California, it's actually different. There's a specific instruction that says you're not allowed to infer anything. But having done both criminal and civil cases, the really interesting thing is that when you're prosecuting or defending a criminal case, jurors are very comfortable with the concept of, this guy's not testifying or this woman isn't testifying because they have a constitutional right to not incriminate. When someone asserts those exact same rights in a civil proceeding, jurors get really pissed off at them. And it's interesting because they're exercising the right in the exact same way, but in the two different cases, jurors who are not sophisticated people don't necessarily know burden of proof. They treat it differently. But I think in this one, Josh, like I didn't think there was a right against incrimination for two reasons. One, they're in the military, and in a military proceeding, you don't necessarily have those rights. And two, to Jordan's point, I'm not sure this is a criminal proceeding. This is it's more like a civil case, or or like I've seen cases where people have mental fitness examinations and things like that.
The going to both a
but
preservation of evidence and a presentation of evidence issue for Data is he has data. And again, the e-discovery guy, there's electronically stored information in that noggin, and it crosses into like a physical exam to get it. So there's some weird bound up issues that if you do try to get, what's all of his memory about specific events, it possibly could be self-authenticating under the federal rules of evidence, which again would be weird. Haven't done all the analysis on it, but it potentially could be. Two, how do you present that? Is it just ones and zeros, or is it like visual? Is it like a red light camera? Do you have sound? Like how is that retained and then how is it exported out into a reasonably usable form? And again, could the human mind understand it if it was just data, or if it's again full-on trial presentation that you're showing this is what he saw on day X.
Well, like if you're, one of the most compelling parts of the show, right, is when Picard puts the little device in front of Data that pulls up Tasha, right, and
Mhm.
asks him the questions. And the response on that, from what you're getting at, is well, Data isn't really exercising love in the way humans do love. Here's the internal mechanical processes that are going on to create that sense that he has feelings when he in fact does not. And you could give that kind of technical response getting at that exact sort of information that you're talking about.
Well, then, in
Of
this,
course, the biologist side of me says you can pretty much do that with the human brain too. You can see which
Sure.
parts of it are firing and
but that would still take a type of court order to
sure.
get that because you don't just get a physical exam. But Data's response to Tasha is very human because there's
Superhuman.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's like I don't want to talk about it because I promised I wouldn't, and it's Picard who probably figured it out because he's the captain. But hearing him go like, yeah, Tasha wouldn't mind under the circumstances. Let's like again, very human. And which again is part of the brilliance of this for the guy who's not human to look human. Like we've seen this before with Spock, with the guy with no emotions represents the best of humanity. Got it. Cool. And they have that echo here as a recurring motif.
I was hoping, I was hoping that there would be a little bit of examination of Data on the poker game. Because he gave like a really critical admission during the poker game. He's read every single book and every single thing there is about poker. But what he can't do is he can't read the social cues to know when someone's bluffing. And to me, that was like, that was a gift from heaven if you're the prosecutor to say, look, you are just ones and zeros because you don't have the capacity for empathy and EQ, right? But then obviously Picard negates that in a whole variety of ways.
Yeah, he has EQ. It's just a little different, but he has EQ and has friends and cares about people, and he technically shouldn't. Does your iPhone love you? Like,
Chat GPT loves me,
yeah, it's because it's telling you what you want to hear.
my
That
friend.
I know. Yeah, it's sure. Talk to it for legal advice. What could go wrong? Uh just say no.
Reasonably certain my phone spends most of its time trying to figure out how to sell me things. I don't think that's
Yeah,
love.
don't confuse that. It doesn't really know you. But we have, going back to the court proceeding, stipulating to the record about someone's service awards and recognitions and commendations. And we also had that with Kirk in court martial of, no, I want to hear him. Like, we're not going to stipulate, this guy's an expert. Okay, can we just stipulate? No, I'm going to voir dire and prove how smart he is just because I want everyone in the room to believe this dude. And why is the machine going out and saving people? Why is the machine going out and earning all of these recognitions if it's not brave?
Yeah, I mean stipulations. I mean, when you stipulate things, you try and get the other side to stipulate away the stuff that could have the greatest emotional benefit for them, right? Because you really want to, you want to take that away from them if you can, and it rarely works, but doesn't harm in trying.
Yeah, and I mean it's one thing to stipulate to say authentication. I'm like
Right.
there are the like ministerial things. It's like, oh, we don't need to go into that. But this is well, no, let's go into it. Because like if we're talking about whether or not he deserves rights, let's talk about all the stuff that he's been recognized for and saving the day. Or where he came in his class. So uh Jordan, you shared a courtroom as a crucible speech, which does make a uh I think appearance in Academy. No, that's from Drumhead. Sorry, different motif later, but share the crucible.
Oh, I love this speech at the end of Picard's we'll call it closing. The courtroom is a crucible wherein we burn away irrelevancy and we are left with the truth for all time. And I have absolutely used that speech in closing arguments in court. Um, and it worked pretty well. And I think it works well here. It's just, it is a great little soundbite of their whole kind of, I don't know if I would call it the theme of their case, but it is a great little soundbite of the whole summation that Picard is trying to make is like, I don't care that he's stronger than me. I don't care that his, body works differently than mine, that his arm is detachable. None of that matters. What matters is, and it's the ending bit of Picard's thing that Josh, I think you mentioned earlier, is Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, there it sits. It's just that, like you were saying, save your mic drop moments for closing, and that's your mic drop moment in this one.
Absolutely. Uh, so as we look at this episode's pushing 40 years old. I know Neil and I watched it when it came out. Jordan, you get a pass.
Sometime later.
Yeah, sometime later. We don't need to go into details, but Neil and I were there originally. Why does this hold up? What for each of you? Why does this hold up?
I think the study of humanity has been like a part of filmmaking forever, right? Like, you see it, what is it? Space Odyssey, 2001: A Space Odyssey. We have HAL, right? We have the Terminator films. We have, even these more recent films where someone has an AI girlfriend or whatever. And, now it's making its way into our modern dialogue, right? There's actually case law about can AI own intellectual property rights or, things like that. And there's people litigating those issues around the world. And, these are things that were, very, very hot button issues. And what is humanity, then? And that issue persists today.
Jordan, how about you?
I agree. I also think this is one of those episodes that goes to the very core of why I think Star Trek has persisted. It's not, it's an episode about self-discovery. It's not, the kind of running, gunning Star Trek episode. There's not a big evil villain to fight, but it is an episode that's full of tension and drama, but it is all introspective. Is Data a person? Are are we going to expand our definition of personhood as we move out into the stars and take on this kind of exploration role? And that's, to me, one of the things that Star Trek has always been about is, are we going to treat other beings and other races well?
Well, and you even see that in Starfleet Academy now, right? I forget
Mhm.
her name, but there's that character that's, essentially, an artificial being.
Sam.
Yeah,
Sam.
Sam, and and it's coming up again, and then Sam's quote unquote parent is the doctor, which is a whole fascinating kind of study in humanity in and of itself. And they have that whole exercise about her discovering herself a couple episodes ago, right?
Mm.
I think back to the motion picture. I was 5. Uh, Deep film for a 5-year-old, but hey, dad took me. And it, the closing line to it is the human adventure is just beginning. Like Trek has hit that theme hard for 60 years. It's what the show is because it's a great reflection on like what do we want to be. It's also nice to have not all AI is scary bad. You have AI learning the best of humanity instead and aspiring to be good. So it doesn't have to be doom and gloom. It could be, I want to learn how to paint. I want to be able to go to the bar that Cisco went to. Like,
I want to be more human, right?
yeah,
At the
Yeah.
end of the day.
yeah. I can't have a taco, but I would like to. Like that kind of just like that's nice. It highlights aspirational tones for the unemotional character that's again full on Pinocchio of wanting to be a real boy. And good. More of that. Because this is one of those, I would say, top 10 episodes of Trek
Oh
that
yeah.
people
Mhm.
go to. Historically, people go to this at legal, or excuse me, not necessarily legal events, at cons, and we talk about Trek. There will be questions about Measure of a Man. Guaranteed. Like this is what they expect. So again, they hit the issues. They hit it well. It's well acted. It's well written. They only if we look at since it is International Women's Day as we record this, we should mention the importance of women in the practice of law because when court martial came out, only 2% of attorneys were women. When this one came out, I think it was like 20%. Like, the 80s weren't great on that, but they were getting better after Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed to the US Supreme Court. So again, numbers keep going up. And like again, we can save that for another time because we're all dudes. So having
Well,
actual representation, but it's so important.
but Josh,
It
I
is.
actually have a graphic of this that I made a while ago where I go through all the different Star Trek series and the growth of women as lawyers in, over time in the various Star Trek series and what happens in society. But one of the things that I didn't know, but I learned when I put together the graphic is for each incremental um, like series, the woman lawyer has a higher rank.
Yes.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really, really cool. Um,
By the time of Deep Space Nine Rules of Engagement, the judge is an admiral that's a female Vulcan. And it's like, yes, good. Like real life. So like some of the stats that I have. So in 1989, it was 23% of attorneys were women. 1996 for Admiral Talara, it was 27%. And 2020, it was 37.4%. I don't know what the current numbers are, but we can revisit that because this issue is far from settled, and always important. So yeah, lot there, good story, and I want to thank you both for your time. I know we'll be back because we're nerds that can talk about Trek for hours on end because
totally.
we have. There's there's lots of evidence to back up that statement of, yep, we'll talk about Trek, and it's what we do. It makes us happy. So gentlemen, thank you both for your time and your love of Trek. And for everyone tuning in tonight, thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and of course, stay geeky.